Hi everyone, nice to see you again. Thank you for attending.
Okay, let's get started. Good evening, dear friends. This evening we are honored to have Scott Ambler as a special guest at PMI Romania. For those who don't know yet, Scott is Vice President and Chief Scientist of Dismant Agile at PMI, a co-founder of Dismant Agile. During the time we had Scott several times as a speaker at our events at PMI Romania, of course, on Dismant Agile related topics. Now we'll see a very interesting connection between Dismant Agile approach and classical PMO structures. It is about how PMOs should deliver value to its stakeholders and how can this transform themselves in value delivery offices. Before starting, here are some basic rules. The event will be recorded and will be accessible on YouTube. During the Scott's presentation, we prefer to switch video and audio off and open them at the end during the Q&A session. Until then, please add questions you might have in the chat window. Now, let's learn together more about PMO, video, and Dismant Agile with Scott Ambler. Valentin, would you shortly introduce Scott?
Yes.
Thank you.
Scott had an important contribution on defining agility beyond the team level, and we can now easily find even online the Dismant Agile toolkit guidance for DevOps, value stream, and enterprise agility. Scott has also a public activity, a contribution for software and management communities through different books, articles, and webinars. Thank you, Scott, for participating in the PMI Romania meeting today. In my experience, I have always some questions about how a project management office can also manage the problems related to continuous delivery. That means delivery without using projects, and for example, in the continuous improvement part for a team, for an organization. And please, Scott, you have the microphone and with all these interesting things.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate being invited back to speak with you, and anyways, yeah, let's jump into it. This is a really interesting topic. So, as you heard, I'm currently the Vice President of and Chief Scientist for Dismant Agile at PMI. Now, having said that, this is actually my last week. So after 3 years at PMI, I'm going back out on my own, and I'm going to be focusing on other things, but certainly still staying within the Agile community and helping organizations to understand Agile better and to apply it often at scale. So having said that, I want to make it clear that everything in this presentation today is my opinion. And so if you're looking for the official word on PMOs from PMI, this is not it. There's currently an effort underway. I will be sharing a lot of PMI information with you, and but there's currently an effort underway to formulate a go forward message and a strategy for PMI's thoughts on PMOs. But having said that, I'll do my best to share where we currently are with that effort, and certainly share my advice from a Dismant Agile point of view. So I'm first going to explore project management offices, what they currently do and what they potentially could do. Then I'm going to focus on industry trends for a while. So what is affecting us? What are we facing as organizations, as professionals, and what effect does that have on our PMOs, and where would PMOs go to? And I'm going to make the argument that we really shouldn't be talking about PMOs anymore. that we should really be talking about value delivery offices. So based on the trends that we're seeing, all of which are phenomenally clear or at least they should be phenomenally clear in the industry, we really need to go beyond the traditional view of PMOs, and maybe you already have. I highly suspect that a large percentage of this presentation, you and your organization will be individually doing already, but you might not be doing all of it. So different people working for different organizations will be doing different things, and that's okay. So you'll be further along this path, or taking a different route than others, but I suspect you're already dealing with some or all of these trends that I'm going to be talking about today. So project management offices, what do they do? What are they? So what do project management offices potentially do? And I say potentially because there is no one right answer. Different organizations will have different flavors of PMOs, if they have one at all. So depending on the situation, depending on how much leeway they've been given, how much authority they've been given, PMOs will work differently. So anyway, so what could they potentially do? Well, often they're involved with strategy. They're at least involved, or they may be completely responsible for your organization's strategy. They're certainly, I would think, responsible for identifying potential projects. They might be doing some aspects of portfolio management. Oh, these hexes, by the way, are from Dismant Agile. We'll see them a little bit more in the future. But anyways, yeah, they might be involved with aspects of portfolio management, initiating projects, executing projects, even seeing them to completion and monitoring them. They're certainly often involved with governance, some aspects of corporate governance. So keeping an eye on the projects, guiding them, reporting results, all important governance things. And certainly also involved with program management. So initiating programs and coordinating project managers between the various teams within a program, or various initiatives within a program, and actually seeing the programs to completion. But there's other things they could also be doing. So it's not just about projects, and this is going to be a very large theme throughout this talk. So yes, they're involved with identifying potential projects, but your organization also brings products and services to market as well, or in the case of government agencies, to your citizens. So there's more to life than projects. So it's not just about projects. There's also more to life than in portfolio management. Not only do portfolio managers, are they responsible for projects, but they should also be responsible for ongoing operations, both business operations as well as IT operations, or at least they potentially are. And what about product management? Might have nothing to do with projects at all, and that's okay. What about non-project governance? So what about data governance within your organization, security governance, financial governance, operational governance, and other forms of governance? How do they all fit in? And is your PMO responsible for that? Are they even involved with those forms of governance? And what about the non-management aspects of programs? What about program architecture? What about product ownership within the programs? That's not really a management issue, is it? So how does this all fit together is a good question. So the point of this slide, and maybe in your organizations, your PMOs might be involved with some of these other things. I don't know, right? Depends on how far down the evolution path you are. But the point is that there is a lot that could potentially be guided and led within your organization that your PMOs may or may not be doing already. So keep that in mind. What's interesting is when you look at this list and ask, what is actually valuable? What are the aspects of all this stuff that's actually involved with producing value? I would argue the stuff that I've highlighted here is focused on producing value, and the rest of it, not so much. Maybe it leads to value at some point, but it's a lot of bureaucracy. So can we automate that stuff away? Do we even need to do it? Might be a fair question to be asking as well. So if you want to be successful in your organization, in your career, focusing on producing value and being seen doing so is generally a good move. Being seen as a bureaucrat, being seen as somebody who's not involved with producing value, not as good of a strategy. So this is from a study that PMI did about 8 or 9 months ago now. It was last fall. And we did a study on what are PMOs doing globally right now. And what we found was that the top 10% of organizations do these 5 things very well, or at least the top 10% of PMOs are doing these 5 things. So being focused on people, being focused on technology and the proper implementation and usage of technology, having effective processes and evolving your processes and methodologies over time. So doing continuous improvement, being well integrated and aligned with the rest of the organization, and effective governance. So these are all seem to be critical success factors for PMOs. We also asked and looked into, COVID issues, right? It's been it's obviously been a big thing the last couple of years, and it's looking to continue to be so, unfortunately, but certainly it is now. And doing things like accelerating new ways of working. So what did organizations do? What did PMOs do to address COVID? Well, adopting new ways of working and new ways of thinking, and continuing to do so. Being smarter about risk assessment and most likely risk mitigation. In DA, we don't talk about risk management at all. We talk about addressing risk, and that's an important nuance. You can manage risk and still run into trouble. I would rather address risk, so actually deal with it. And then delivering real value and showing their ability to deliver value was a critical success factor in the top 10% of organizations. So a lot of good intel here. We also learned that the top 10% continuously adapt their processes. I mentioned this earlier, and I'll probably mention this another 20 times today. Continuous process improvement is absolutely critical to the success of your organization. You should be constantly learning, constantly experimenting, constantly striving to get better. Following old processes and the one official way of working, it doesn't get the job done anymore. If you want to be a successful organization, you must become a learning organization. You want to transform into an organization that is constantly improving, constantly getting better. And this must be brought into your project management, into your management strategies in general. You have to expect the teams to be constantly improving and give them the resources and time needed to experiment and to learn. This is what successful organizations do. And invest in your people. Obviously, I hope that I'm preaching to the choir on this one. Invest in your ways of working, invest in your people. So let's start exploring some trends. One trend is enterprise agility. How can organizations become more effective, become more responsive in the marketplace? So Dismant Agile is the basis for enterprise agility, and particularly the mindset. So the mindset of Dismant Agile is based on 3 concepts. We believe in a collection of principles. As a result, we make promises both to ourselves and to the people that we work with. Here's how we're going to behave. Here's how we're going to act. And in order to fulfill these promises, we follow these guidelines. This is described on the site. For Dismant Agile Mindset, you'll quickly see, you'll quickly find lots of information about this. Including mindset, ways of thinking, Dismant Agile also calls out ways of working for the enterprise. So just like we've gone with the mindset, we've gone beyond the Agile Manifesto. which was written 21 years ago to solve the problems of software development back then, with the mindset, we looked beyond software development to look at the entire organization. We also have done the same thing in the rest of the toolkit. So how can we improve agile ways of working, or just ways of working across the entire organization? So we've organized the toolkit into 4 layers. The first layer is a foundation layer. This is where all the fundamental concepts land, ideas, ways of working, ways of thinking that are applicable across the entire organization, not just software teams. Building upon that is the Dismant Agile or the Dismant DevOps layer. For a modern organization, this is table stakes in my mind. You've got to be good at developing software, getting the software into production, acting on what you're learning, improving, evolving the software constantly, and your IT systems constantly. And this is what Dismant DevOps is all about. Building upon that streams, so how do we bring products and services to market, and then the rest of the organization, how do we support that? So how do we take how does the finance team support the rest of the organization? So because your organization is a hybrid, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. You've got some agile teams, some lean teams, some project teams, some non-project teams, some traditional teams, and that's okay. And finance and enterprise architecture and your HR, your people management, they all need to interact with those teams in a way that's appropriate for them. So the way that finance supports an agile team is very different than the way finance will support a traditional team. Same thing for HR, for enterprise architecture, and so on. We need to be flexible. Same thing for your PMO or your VDO, as I'll soon argue. A second trend is hybrid agile. This is, if you don't recognize this, this is a platypus. When platypuses were first discovered by Europeans, they brought a preserved dead platypus back to England to show it off, and people thought it was fake. They thought, obviously somebody had taken a duckbill and a beaver and a few other creatures and glued them together somehow and created this fake thing. It was clearly a hybrid of real animals to create this fake animal. Well, no, it was a real animal. It made sense. This hybrid animal, this platypus made sense for the environment that it was in, and it's very successful in the environment that it lives in. Same thing for your organization, for your teams. They're hybrids. So Dismant Agile is not a framework, it's a toolkit. So we provide straightforward guidance to enable you to make better decisions about your ways of working and your ways of thinking. So that way you can continuously improve. And remember that continuous improvement, continually investing in your ways of working is a success factor for PMOs. We saw that earlier in the results of that study that I shared. So Dismant Agile is an umbrella over hundreds of techniques and strategies and practices. And the idea is that just like when you go home today to make dinner, you'll go to your kitchen, you'll go to your pantry and pull ingredients off the shelf, combine them into a meal that makes sense for you and your family this evening. It's the same thing for your ways of working. You'll collect, you will gather up the practices and the strategies that make sense for your team and your situation to produce a fit for purpose way of working for you. So a data warehousing team will work very differently than your finance team, than an application development team, than your procurement team, and so on. My application development team will work very differently than your application development team because we're different people working on different things in a different situation. One size does not fit all. So we want to have fit for purposes ways of working. DA helps you to do that by providing a toolkit that puts these techniques into context. Right now, there's probably 17 or 1,800 techniques put into context in the DA toolkit. I haven't gotten an exact count lately, but the last time I did it, it was 1,600, and I know we've added a few since then. Context counts. Different teams in different situations work in different ways. A team of 10 people works differently than a team of 100 people. We know this. This is blatantly obvious. A team that's globally distributed works in a very different way than a team working together in a single co-located room. A team in a non-compliant situation works very differently than a team in a life-critical compliancy situation, and so on. A team taking on a very easy or straightforward problem works in a much different manner than a team taking on a very complex problem. Different teams in different situations work different ways. So naturally, they need different ways of working if you want to allow them to be successful. And this is absolutely critical for this is a critical observation for anybody in any sort of group that touches multiple teams, like a PMO. If you've got different projects, you need to expect them to work in different ways because they're taking on different problems. And as a result, you need to govern them differently and effectively if you want to allow them to be successful. A third trend is hybrid organizations. This is a picture from a building in downtown Toronto. On the left, we see a bank from the 1800s. On the right, we see a office tower that's put up in the late 1980s, if my memory is correct. And in between, we see scaffolding. Before that building on the right was put up, this was actually an alleyway. So when they built this building, they turned the alleyway into an indoor mall by putting this glass and steel scaffolding in place. And for anybody who likes science fiction, this hallway here is used as the evil headquarters for in several TV shows and movies over the years. Toronto is called Hollywood North. So anyways, so why am I talking about this? This is an example of an organization or of an architecture that respects legacy and traditional aspects as well as new and puts them together. And this is exactly the way your organizations are built. You might have parts of your organization that have been around for centuries. I've worked in some organizations that are over 3 centuries old. I've certainly worked in many organizations that are several decades old, and there's legacy aspects to those organizations. There's also very new aspects to those organizations as well. And you got to keep it all running. The way the building is maintained, or the different buildings here, and the scaffolding is maintained and operated is different for each of these buildings because they're different buildings. They're different parts of the overall mall organization. This is something called the Path in Toronto. In downtown Toronto, there's over 30 kilometers of attached mall between all these buildings. And this is just one very small part of it. So anyways, enough about Toronto, my hometown. So teams need a fit for purpose approach. They need to be allowed to work in different ways. So when I go into organizations, I choose to observe what's going on, not what people are telling me, but what's actually happening. So you can walk in, I know nothing about your organizations, but I can safely say you've probably got some Agile projects underway. You might have some Agile continuous delivery efforts as well, so non-projects. So you might have long-standing product teams that have been working on the same product or the same service or providing the same types of services in terms of an organization for years. So it's not a project. It might have started as a project, but you kept the team together and allowed them to improve, allowed them to get good at what they do. And you're now in a product or long-standing team situation. So both of these life cycles are based on Scrum. You might also have teams that are working in a lean project type of mode, or a continuous delivery lean team. This is very common for services teams or your help desk teams, for example, but it's also common for software teams and data warehousing teams, for example. So these two life cycles, all of which are in Dismant Agile, are based on the Kanban method. So different teams work in different situations. The top two life cycles are project life cycles. The bottom two life cycles are product or service team life cycles. So if you're focused just on projects, you've missed half of the life cycles so far, and there's more. There's also an exploratory life cycle for doing based on lean startup. So how do we take a hypothesis-driven approach to exploring new product or new service ideas to de-risk our projects or de-risk our initiatives? This is also not a project. Exploratory efforts might take days, weeks, months, and it's not predictable because you're exploring what your stakeholders, what your customers potentially want, and it's iterative. So you just keep exploring until you either discover what your customers really want, or you give up because you realize, oh, this was just a bad idea, and we're just not finding anything that our customers really actually want. So it's better to not do any more work in this. Of course, there's a program life cycle. So how do you organize an initiative of initiatives, a team of teams, perhaps? And then working in progress is a serial life cycle. So how do you take a traditional approach under the scope of under the aegis of Dismant Agile? So how do you map traditional serial ways of working to a more robust toolkit? And of course, citizen development. So how do you apply low code or no code development tools and enable the business to build their own apps? And that's exactly what citizen development is all about. There's a little more to it than what the tool vendors tell you. So be wary, but also if you haven't done so already, take a look at PMI's citizen development offering. It's really solid because it looks at the overall process and governance and not just the whiz-bang fancy tooling stuff. My take on, and I've been doing this sort of stuff for years. I originally started writing about this in the late 1980s and early 1990s when it was called end user computing. So be very careful about what the vendors are telling you is possible. Yes, you can bang out an application really quickly, but how are you going to run it? And, is it the right thing to be building? So how are you going to test it? Very interesting questions you might want to ask yourselves. So take a look at citizen development, a lot of good stuff going on there. And we've been bringing in citizen development into the toolkit for a while now. And certainly serial ways of working have been in the toolkit for many, many years. So we're just adding explicit life cycles now. So the point I want to make, a long-winded one, is that different teams work in different ways. They need a fit for purpose approach. So a project management, so taking a look at this, a project management office isn't covering, if you're just focused on projects, you're not covering all of this, right? You might be covering the agile and lean project life cycles, maybe the serial project life cycle. That tends to be a project. You're very likely not covering citizen development. That's a big up and coming thing. You may or may not be covering programs, arguably also not a project. Certainly not if you take a look at the new thinking around programs. So yeah, you might not be covering the full gambit of what's actually going on in your organization. That's a hard position to be in. You got to look beyond projects. So here's an example. This is from an actual real world organization. This is a simplification of what they're doing. But this is an organization that has 3 initiatives underway. They're doing product development. This is a trucking company. They're doing product development. They're building some software for the truckers to use. They've got a project underway to do installation of new hardware into various trucks because they've got either the cab doesn't have the hardware or has older versions of things, and they have different types of trucks and all that good sort of stuff, different types of hardware. So it's not just an easy thing to do. And they got to keep these trucks on the road while they're doing these updates. And they're also building a new shipping bay maintenance facility thing, like a physical building. So these are 3 very different initiatives because this organization is a hybrid. I would expect a PMO or more likely a VDO, a value delivery office, to be actively guiding all 3 of these efforts, and then whatever else this organization has underway. So keep this in mind. We're gonna return to this example in a bit. Another trend is called project to product. This is a huge trend in the software world. It's also trending. It's also a trend in the intangible world. I like to look at efforts or initiatives in two different categories. Intangible efforts, generally working with bits, so software projects, IP, creating movies, creating plays, physical plays, things like that. You're working with bits. And then tangible initiatives where you're working with atoms. So you're building a building, you're building hardware, you're building, you're working with physical items. So in the intangible space, particularly the software space, this is a huge trend. They're abandoning the concept of projects in the software world. Projects are being seen as too risky now, and too much of an overhead. And what you really want are long-standing product teams, not short-term project teams. So how is this playing out? So we're seeing teams evolving their way of working. So the first, from a Dismant Agile point of view, the first release of your software, so say this is a software team, we'll go through these three phases. Inception, we have to initiate the team, get going in the right direction. Construction, we got to build something. And transition, we have to deploy it in production. In Agile, we shift our thinking activities to the right. So, and what we mean by this is planning and modeling are so important. We do it all the way through the life cycle. It's not just a trivial phase that we do up front. So we have a planning phase or an architecture phase. That's nice, but our plan has to evolve over time to deal with reality. Our architecture has to evolve as we learn. Our requirements evolve as our stakeholders learn. So we want to push these thinking activities, modeling and planning, all the way through the life cycle. Similarly, if we're competent, we push our quality activities to the left. You've probably heard the term shift left a lot from your Agile coaches, and not so much the shift right concept, but both things are happening because quality testing, quality assurance, they're so important. We want to do them all the way through the life cycle. This is the way we end up with better quality, and it's cheaper and faster to do. Having testing phases at the end of the life cycle, at the end of your project, that was barely acceptable in the 1980s. It certainly isn't acceptable anymore. And certainly a testing phase at the end of the project is better than no testing at all, but barely better than no testing at all. Testing and quality is so important. I want to do it. I want to focus on it every single day, bottom line. So how do we shift these activities? Well, if we're looking at things from the point of view of a project, it's really hard to do. And we're not motivated to improve. Because if I'm on a 6-month project, I might learn something to pad out my resume, but do I really care about the team? No, because I'm not going to be working with these people afterwards, more than likely, right? It's just the hardcore reality on the ground. So the first release, though, so let's assume, though, we're going to keep the team together because we're going to be smart about this, because we realize that our software products, these applications, these systems that we build, have a long lifespan, years, decades. So we really want to keep the team together. If we're building an asset for the organization, it's going to evolve. It has to evolve because the organization evolves, the situation changes over time. So when we keep the team together, this is what we start to see. So yeah, we have an inception phase up front because we have to do some initial modeling, some initial planning, some, put the team together, initial kickoff type stuff. We have to build something, and then eventually we deploy or transition our work into production. But then we keep the team together. We go on to the next release. So inception starts to shrink very quickly because if I keep the team together, well, I don't have team building to do. I know what the architecture is. It's whatever we built before. I know what the requirements are. It's whatever we didn't get around to building yet. I've got a pretty good, might have to do a little bit of planning because somebody's probably going to ask us for a release date for the next release, but that's about it. Transition also starts to shrink because if I know I'm going to be sticking around on this team, if my teammates know this as well, we're motivated to start automating transition away. This is what a lot of the DevOps movement is all about. We're motivated to automate our regression tests because all this deployment stuff, this transition stuff isn't fun. Nobody likes doing it. So we want to automate it away. We want to make it as cheap and fast and as guaranteed as possible. We want to de-risk it through automation. So the next release, inception, has pretty much disappeared. Transition is shrinking through hard work. And it's all through increased automation. And more than likely, construction is shrinking as well, because if it becomes inexpensive to release something into production, then we can release it more often, right? So, you know, if say it costs me $10,000 to release something into production, I have to build at least $10,000 worth of value to justify that cost of transition. But if it costs me $100 or $10 to release into production because it's a fully automated thing, then I can release it pretty much as often as I want, because it's fast and it's safe and it's virtually free. So by keeping the team together, we get into this mode, more of this continuous delivery DevOps type of a mode, where we build something, release it, build something, release it, build something, release it. You can release multiple times a day. I'm working with a team right now that releases into production multiple times a day, and they think nothing of it. It's that trivial. It's that low risk, because we're good at it. Simple as that. We've chosen to automate the living heck out of it all. So this is a virtuous trend. This is something we want from an organization's point of view. This is what we want. From a team point of view, this is what we want. We want to move away. So this is why all these organizations around the world are moving, at least in the software space, are moving away from projects to more of a product thinking. It's lower risk, it's faster, it's cheaper. What's not to like about this? And it's better for the people too. One more trend, value streams. So what we're seeing, so a value stream is the way that you bring value to your customers, to your citizens. It's the way that you bring products and services that are valuable to them, that are attractive to them, and do so on a regular basis. So a value stream begins, ends, and hopefully continues with a customer in mind. So this is a new rendering of the DA Flex lifecycle. The major change is the inner loop. And the idea is that the first time you go through this loop, there's probably a little more strategy and portfolio management work to be done. But once you have an existing product, an existing service up and running, you can speed things up by going straight to product management efforts. And because now we're maintaining, we're operating, we're evolving an existing product or service. So it's not a lot of strategy involved. And certainly I don't want my portfolio, why would I bring portfolio management to that? Doesn't make any sense, right? So we can streamline things, be smarter about it. So the point here from a PMO point of view is, if you remember what I was talking about earlier regarding PMOs, they might be involved a bit in strategy, might be involved or completely running portfolio management, depending on the situation. They're probably involved in some aspects of governance. They're probably involved in some aspects of program management, and that's about it. What's interesting is they're not involved in value generation for the most part. Value is generated in this model by your business operations people bringing real value to the customers. Note the use of the term potential value and consumable solutions in that, but it's not until something is in the hands of your customers and they get value from it, that's when value is actually earned or achieved. Until then, it's only potential value, right? So all this value we talk about in projects and earned value and all that sort of stuff, it's not actually true. No value is earned until something is in the hands of your customer. Up until that point, it's potential value at best. But I'm sure many of you, particularly those in the software world, I'm sure many of you have been involved in projects that have been declared successes. Yet the reality is the project, you'll release into production, you'll release into the marketplace, and nobody wants to use your software. Wonderful work, it's like, great, you did a great job building software, but nobody likes it. Nobody wants to pay for it. Nobody wants to use it. So that's still a failure. I don't care if you're on time and on budget. You brought the wrong thing to market. Who cares? You've actually removed value from your organization. You haven't added it. So we need to look at, value is in the eye of the customer. So I've probably belabored that point. But anyways, something to consider. So finally, where am I getting to? What is the value delivery office? What is the VDO? So if you look at the latest edition of the PMBOK Guide, which has been out for a couple of years now, there's some really interesting concepts there. Like, look at principle number 4, focusing on value. Number 7, tailoring based on context. Number 9, navigating complexity. 8, building quality into your processes and deliverables. So pushing, quality left in the life cycle. Having a collaborative team environment, and so on. So a lot of very great ideas there. Number 11, embracing adaptability and resiliency. Number 12, enabling change to achieve the envisioned future state. So, enable change, allow your teams to evolve, to learn, to get better, to continuously improve, to adopt new ways of working. Get out of the way, basically, right? Allow your teams to succeed, because there's more to it than project stuff. So the Value Delivery Office, this is a term that I prefer. Another term that's popular in the marketplace is Value Management Office. And I prefer value delivery for 2 reasons. First, a focus on value rather than just projects, because delivering projects successfully, yeah, that's nice. But as we've seen, it's about more than just projects. And all of us, I imagine, have seen too many projects that have been declared to be successful, but really didn't deliver any value. So that's not, politically, yeah, you might have declared it to be a success, but that's not a real success. We really need to be clear about that. And it's not just about management. I'm a bit leery about the term management in this context. It's really about delivering value, because there's more to this work. I'm not going to go back to it, but if you remember the value stream life cycle, and I didn't show anything in behind all that, but management is certainly important. Don't get me wrong, but there's many other things that are also important. So it's really about value delivery, not about value management. But anyways, I can fully get behind the value management term as well. So this is a great book. It came out about a year ago from Sanjeev Augustine and Roland and Audrey. Fantastic book, overviewing the concept of VMOs. And notice the subtitle, managing for value delivery, because they in that book they focus on management stuff. Myself and Mark Lyons, the 2 co-creators of Dismant Agile, we wrote the foreword to this book. So this is a great little book. It's maybe 150 pages, darn good read. And it walks through in detail all this stuff that I've been, how to actually execute and move towards being a VMO or a VDO. What are some of the implications of that? Well, first, let's go back to this trucking company. So remember, we had 3 different projects: the software project Helio, the hardware installation project Gridiron, and the Homestead project. I should also mention, for those of you who have taken PMI's Agile Metrics micro-credential, this is one of the cases that we worked through in that micro-credential. And if you haven't taken that micro-credential, it's awesome. I highly suggest looking into it. This is a good set of skills to have if you're doing any sort of measurement at all in your organization. So different teams get measured in different ways. I'm clearly going to measure a software team and a software initiative in a much different way than a building construction initiative. So here's some potential metrics that you might want to collect. There's some overlap between teams, but there's also some very important differences between teams as well. So for example, I can measure quality on all 3 of those teams, but quality for a software team is measured in a much different way than quality for a hardware installation team, and measured differently again than for a building team, right? Different teams in different situations are going to be measured in different ways, yet we still need to be able to roll it up to the portfolio level, for example, in some sort of intelligent red light, green light thing, perhaps. So this requires sophistication on the part of the people in your VMO or VDO. Another thing we do in Dismant Agile to improve, to make governance lightweight, is we have common risk-based milestones. Now, we haven't released it yet, but we've mapped these milestones to a serial life cycle. So hopefully that'll come out soon. But anyways, the idea is that we don't want to inflict the same governance strategy on different teams, right? So an agile team in a non-regulatory compliant situation will be governed in a much different way than an agile team in a life critical regulatory situation, which will be governed differently again than that team building the warehouse, right? The physical warehouse. Different teams, different situations will be governed in different ways. So a governance strategy that's set up for life critical regulatory compliance will be overkill, absolute overkill for a governance strategy that you have to govern a team that's not in a life critical regulatory situation. A governance strategy that's geared for old ways of thinking, this, a serial or traditional or a predictive, if you're still using that term, a predictive life cycle, will be completely inappropriate for an agile team or for a lean team. So different teams need to be governed in different ways, yet we can still have consistent risk address strategies in place. So anyways, we built this right into the toolkit because we recognize in DA that your organization is a hybrid. You've got teams working in a hybrid manner. You've got an organization built up of a hybrid organization built up of these teams with a very wide range of initiatives going on, and yet you still need to govern and lead those teams. So we've got some fairly sophisticated strategies in place to enable you to do that. One size does not fit all. So a few more ideas about lean governance. So lean governance is about leadership. It's about working in a way where you guide your teams, you lead, you motivate people to do the right thing, and then you make it as easy as possible to do the right thing through automation, through corporate processes, through groups that help. Because people are inherently lazy. They will take the easy path. So if the easy path is the right path, it's the way you want people to work, make that as easy as possible. Make the hard path difficult. So the behaviors you don't want to see, make it hard to have those behaviors. Make it easy to have the behaviors that you're looking for. It's really that simple. So good governance is about motivation enablement. It's not about command and control. We need to respect our people. So lean governance, what are you trying to achieve? Well, you want to make sure your organization's investment is spent wisely. It's not about being on budget. It's about spending the money wisely. Those are two completely different things. We want to motivate people to work together. We want to make sure our ecosystem is sound. We want to monitor and mitigate our risks. We want to address risk, not just manage it. And we want to make sure all these things are true now, today, and in the future. So it's not just about getting the job done now, but we also need to be thinking long term and ensuring that our organization will be successful over time. So we extend the Dismant Agile mindset for governance. One of the things that's unique about the DA toolkit is we recognize that different groups of people come to the table with different ways of thinking. So the governance people have a slightly different mindset than the software people, who have a different mindset than the security people, who have a different mindset than the procurement people, and so on and so on and so on. So for each of the process blades, those hexes that I've been showing throughout these slides, we have a set of unique philosophies that are specific to that business area, specific to that process blade. In this case, these are the philosophies for effective governance that build upon the overall mindset, the DA mindset, the principles, promises, and guidelines. So we can be respectful of the other people in our organization, including the governance people, and fair enough. So predictability is a big thing in many organizations, or at least they try to, and there's a lot of bureaucracy in traditional organizations around predictability and trying to pretend that you're predictable when you really aren't. But anyways, what happens? So I hope you're familiar with the iron triangle. This is something that's been in the PMBOK, I think since PMBOK 3. I could be wrong about that, but certainly it's been around for a long, long time. And the basic idea is that if you're of this goal, these goals of being on time, on budget, and working to specification, doing what you've been told to do, at least one of those three factors must vary. Otherwise, the quality of your work will suffer. So if you try to be on time, on budget to spec, you'll get something done, but it'll more than likely be garbage. And you'll have to have a second or third project to fix the mess that you created on the first one, right? So at least one of those three factors must vary. Better yet, all three should be allowed to vary if you've got the skills to pull that off. But let's consider a Dismant Agile iron triangle. So instead of worrying about quality, which is absolutely important, I would rather focus on value, of which quality is obviously an important aspect of value. Instead of worrying about being to spec, I would rather produce something that your stakeholders actually need, because we know that people aren't good at telling us what they want. And even if they are, they change their minds. Either that's just the nature of them, or it's because the situation has changed and now they need something different than what they asked for a few weeks or a few months ago. So we need to enable and embrace the idea that change is going to happen and focus on what do you actually need now rather than what did you ask me for earlier. So we want to release regularly. Remember when I was talking earlier about that team that we kept together and we started reducing inception and transition, all good sort of stuff, and release more often? What's an interesting side effect of that is, well, when you're on a project, so say you're on a 3 or 9 month project, answering basic questions like when are you going to deliver and how much is going to cost, that's on people's minds, at least the people trying to govern. But when I'm releasing, I've been on teams where we've released into production every Friday, or I'm on a team now. We can potentially release daily when we want to. We release whenever we want to. But when you're releasing every Friday, nobody asks anymore when you're going to release, because the answer is the same. Yeah, we're releasing at 3 in the afternoon on Friday. Right? What's your budget? Well, it's like we've got 6 people on the team, so whatever the charge out rate is times 6 people, that's our budget. Right. So these questions of on time, on budget disappear. They literally disappear when you release on a regular basis, because it's an inane question when you're visibly and constantly producing value for your customers. But they're serious questions when you're still working in projects. And finally, I don't care about being on budget. I really don't. Neither do the finance people. I have a background in finance, by the way. What we do care about is, are you spending the money wisely? Now, they might be asking you to be on budget because they don't trust you to spend the money wisely at all. It's not even a concept that you're capable of doing that. But when you work in a more sophisticated manner, the conversation shifts from are you on budget to are we spending this money appropriately? And that's what it's really all about. So this is the DA iron triangle. And frankly, we also want all three of these things should be flexible. We constantly want to be focusing on doing the right thing rather than fulfilling some upfront contract that we foolishly signed on to. Oh, and by the way, there's ways you can do this in the contracting world as well, but I'm not going to go into that at all. So the governance blade and DA provides many options. This is a process goal diagram. If you're not familiar with them, that's basically a way to visually communicate the fact that you've got choices and you want to choose the right techniques, the right strategies for you in your situation. And from a leadership point of view, we also provide some really good advice, being transparent, promoting the idea of self-organizing teams, enabling teams to learn continually. You want to communicate continually, having actionable metrics and then actually acting on your actionable metrics. Providing good guidance, audit guidance to your teams, and so on. So there's a lot of great ideas there. And as you can see, this is online, fully public on the DA site at PMI.org, and a collection of good strategies that you probably want to adopt as well. Once again, all very readable and accessible. And these slides are being, I should have mentioned this earlier, these slides are being shared with you as well. So my apologies if you've been madly writing, you didn't need to. So where do we go from here? How can you learn more about this? So as I hope you know, PMI's mission is to help you to work smarter, to support you in your career, to support you in enabling your organization to work smarter and being successful. We really are here to help and to provide great advice for you. I always like to point out that successful Agile organizations take responsibility for evolving their own agility. They don't just adopt a framework like Scrum or SAFe or LESS or others. That might be a great starting point for you, don't get me wrong, but it's not your end point. I don't care how good Scrum or SAFe is or whatever it is that you've adopted, you still need to tailor it to your situation. You still need to learn, you still need to improve, you still need to get better. And none of these frameworks, none of these methods fit for all teams. And as you saw earlier, this is why DA supports multiple life cycles. Different, your help desk team will work in a much different way than your marketing team, than an application development team, and rightfully so. And you have to allow them to do that. So these frameworks, none of these frameworks are 100% applicable to you. You need to have the skills. You need to adopt the skills to evolve your own way of working, and that's what DA is all about. So how can you do this? Well, obviously, PMI training partners offer a range of potential workshops for you. A beginning workshop is the DA Scrum Master. This is really an overview of DA, and it goes far beyond being a Scrum Master. So this is probably misnamed as a cert. So maybe at some point we'll see an update to that name. The Dismant Agile Senior Scrum Master is really about team coaching. How do we guide teams in learning how to learn and improve and apply the toolkit to learn at the team level and to improve at the team level? This is an incredibly valuable skill that you want to have as a professional in general, let alone as a PM. The DA Coach Cert is all about how do we lead improvement across disparate teams? How do we get 2 or 3 different types of teams with different priorities, different backgrounds, different mindsets to work together and to experiment and learn together and to improve together? And then finally, the DA Value Stream Consultant. How do I lead improvement across value streams, across the organization? So, as I went up the screen, this is more and more senior training, more senior skills and value being added. So as a project manager, what's an Agile career path for you? This is a question I get asked a lot. Well, you might want to move from being a project manager to being an Agile project manager. So there's several micro certs that you might want to look into and take. There's also obviously the PMI ACP certification. You might want to become a product owner. This is a fantastic career change for Agile project managers. And we have a DA product owner workshop coming out. It's sort of in beta or pilot right now, but we hope to bring it out across the world soon. You might want to become a coach. A lot of the DA certifications are around coaching. So become a team coach via DA SSM, a senior coach, or even an enterprise coach. Or you might want to become a Scrum Master. That's an interesting career move for some project managers as well. Become a team lead or a Scrum Master on your teams. And the DA Scrum Master certs is a good start at that. So anyway, so thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions for a few minutes if you're interested, but let's open the line to questions.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, Scott, for another interesting presentation about Dismant Agile. Now, addressing topics related to governance structures such as PMO and how deliver value to stakeholders through videos. Thank you again. And now let's start the Q&A session. Who wants to start?
Before we go into that, I'm going to send in the chat a link for feedback form, and then I will share on the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ruslan.
Thank you, Scott. An excellent presentation, as usual.
So, who wants to start? I saw several questions from Tom Gilb. Thank you, Tom, for your valuable input. Maybe
Hey, Tom.
It would be a good idea to start with this. Tom, if you want to open the audio channel and directly address the questions,
Okay,
if you want,
just
of course.
one simple question. I'm always afraid when everybody talks about value streams, and it turns out they mean financial value streams. Now, there are other values, for example, security, privacy, and usability, which are qualities. And I'm wondering whether Scott includes all other stakeholder valued values, not just economic factors. In other words, what's the definition of value?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, there are different types of value streams. The one that I showed 20 slides ago is more of I think more of a delivery development type of value stream where we're bringing products and services to market or to the citizens, as in the case of government agencies. But there's certainly like service value streams, like your help desk, for example, in your organization doesn't really, yes, internal people are customers of help desk and all that stuff, but that like a service-based value stream or an internal service value stream, I should more correctly say, is certainly a different animal than a external facing customer oriented value stream. So quick answer is yes. Short answer is no, I didn't show that. Big topic with very little time devoted to it was the really quick answer to that.
Thanks.
A great question. Thank you.
Okay, so anyone else who wants to ask questions or maybe provide some comments from the audience? Valentin, I saw that you also comment something related to the release size.
Yeah, but Scott already
Covered the topic.
covered the topic. In time, when inception becomes smaller, transition becomes smaller, construction becomes more. Finally, the release size also becomes smaller, and that is also very clear stated also in the Agile manifesto. This principle, deliver more often. And some methods like Scrum forgot about this principle, and other methods like extreme programming has clearly expressed with small release practice. But there is a lot of information in Dismant Agile about how to evolve from a Scrum-based life cycle to continuous delivery.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, definitely.
I saw another interesting question also from Tom related to the value measurement. How about, Tom asked, how about no value is really earned until it is measured at the stakeholder level?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Scott, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. So we're big on measurement. As anybody knows you're a bit big on measurement too. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It should be measured somehow. Now, the one challenge is value is often in the eye of the beholder, so it can be difficult to measure. But you should have measurements in place for value delivery for many things, not just that. And so the quick answer is it always depends on what are you trying to improve, what are you trying to keep track of, but certainly measuring value and value delivery is I would recommend as an important thing. But one of the things in DA, we don't prescribe things, right? So I always have to be careful. I don't want to say thou shalt measure value. I will highly recommend it, but I won't say thou shalt, nor will I say thou shalt collect this exact metric. Although we do highly recommend some things, but yeah, so because everybody's different, context counts.
Interesting question from Ilie Dragan. What are the DA framework vulnerabilities?
Vulnerabilities. Oh, that's a great question. I think the main one, our main challenge is still on the marketing side of things and getting people to understand the value, because we're basically telling people that we can help you make better decisions. We can help you to actually learn how to improve. It's a bit of a foreign concept for many organizations still. Because they look for easy answers. You know, I just want to adopt Scrum, or I just want to adopt Safe, and then, you know, I want to install Agile is basically the attitude, and that just doesn't work. It might be a good start. You know, don't get me wrong, it might be a good start, but it's certainly not your end. It's not your end goal, and so it's hard. You know, so when we say, well, wait a minute, it depends and context counts, that's a hard message for a lot of people to understand. It's also challenging for some coaches because there's a great, well, perhaps not so great strategy around failing fast in the Agile community, which I like, but I can also choose to observe that it covers up a lot of really bad behaviors, particularly around the lines of not observing and not thinking, and a lot of really arrogant behavior, and a lot of billing by consultants and coaches, which I guess, you know, I'm a firm believer in that, but it's not a firm believer in paying for it. But anyway, so the problem is that why, you know, when you're running an experiment with the new way of working, does this new way of working work for us in our situation? That's a great thing. But are you experimenting with something that has a very low probability of success? Is there something else that, if you knew about it, would you have instead gone down a different path with a much greater chance of success, and thereby maybe avoid a failure or two, right? So with a little bit of thinking, a little bit of humility, of recognizing that my team is probably struggling with issues that other people have already, other people in very similar situations have solved before, maybe I could leverage their learnings and not be fooling around as much. Because there's a lot of fooling around with the fail fast. So with the fail fast strategy, I would rather be succeeding early. Like if I can so DA helps you to reduce the chance of failure, or to increase the chance of success is probably a better way of saying that, and thereby improve faster. Just because you can avoid some, unnecessary learning. So for example, I don't need to experiment with, gee, I wonder if gravity works in my office. I didn't need to run that experiment. It's pretty obvious, right? And there's I see teams all the time experimenting with things that, ooh, that's a bad idea. Okay, let's see it play out. And yeah, there's something to be said for learning things the hard way. But you know what? Sometimes, if we'd only experimented with something different, maybe we would have had a better overall experience. So DA helps you to, so the toolkit helps you to reduce your chance of failure, but communicating that is hard. People really struggle with this idea that, wait a minute, you just told me, that I'm unique, but I'm still suffering from similar challenges that many other people solve. So bit of a dichotomy there, but anyways, yeah. So our big vulnerability right now is marketing. But
thank you for the answer, Scott.
Yeah. Maybe one more question. I've got a hard stop at 1:45, unfortunately.
Okay, the last question.
Okay.
Who is willing to address? Anyone from the audience?
Oh, maybe not then. Okay. Well, I'm easy to reach. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me via social media or whatever.
Okay. Thank you very much, Scott. We are waiting your input anytime. So let's please keep in touch. apart from the news that you just shared with us related to PMI. So doesn't matter. Okay, thank you also, Tom Gill, for those recommendations. Interesting books. Some of them have been discussed in our meetings. We already delivered some books like Anti-Fragile from Taleb and other things. Very interesting. So thank you, all of you. We are waiting for our next events in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much. If no other questions, see you soon.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
And stay safe in the heat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, Scott.
Bye.
Thank you.